They're culture warriors. Like, that is like their battlefield right now. They don't give a I don't even know if they care about economic Any one of these conspiracies that you're alleging on its own, even one of them would be the biggest conspiracy of all time in the history of like 100%. International politics. Just one of them. But you're alleging that like 5 of them are happening. If Hunter Biden played a similar role in President Biden's affairs as fucking Jared Kushner did with Donald Trump, they would lose it. I don't want Trump to not be president because he did some illegal shit. I want the American people to not favor Trump. That's one of the scariest, really, statements that's probably ever been uttered by a US president. This is the leader of the Republican Party? A real estate dude from New York City? Come the fuck on. Sorry.
Listen, I know you're on this drama kick, but I need you to get back to politics.
I'm here. What's up?
We're like 6 weeks away from midterms, baby.
Crazy shit. And stuff has gone insane, flipping around. Yeah, for sure.
Well, yeah.
Cautiously.
And no, so like, have you been following like 538 at all? Have you checked them? Like,
nope, not at all.
Okay, so right now I think it is like we're 75% likely to either keep or expand our majority in the Senate.
Okay.
But just as likely to lose our majority in the House.
Okay.
And I think you and I already discussed this a little bit. But do you agree if the Republicans take back the House, it's basically the end of Biden's legislative agenda?
Yeah, for sure. Which I'm okay with, but yeah.
Really?
I mean, it would suck, but like, I think that Biden has accomplished more legislatively in 2 years than I would have thought he would have done in 8.
No, 100%.
So, I mean, 100%. It would suck, obviously, if we're stuck for 2 years doing nothing, but yeah. But I agree that's probably what the case would be, yeah.
Well, it's interesting because, you know, as somebody who definitely has not gone through a centrist arc for years and who honestly expected Biden to be much less legislatively effective. I mean, because he did go through like a dry spell. I think he like passed that infrastructure deal in November of last year. And then until I think it was the safety thing. Which
it started to look like between cinema and Manchin and everything, it started to look like we were basically going to have to hype up the COVID shit in the infrastructure bill, which was still good on its own, but yeah.
Were you losing faith though? Or did you lose faith in Joe? Be honest.
Well, it's not really as much a matter of Joe as it is the stars aligning and like the correct legislative agenda getting pushed. I wonder who has more of a say on that. Is it Joe? Is it Pelosi? Is it a collaborative effort? Or I'm not sure.
I mean, it's a fair point. I do. So like, you know, it is true that because like we always do this with the president, right? So we always give more, if we're being completely above board, we always give more credit to the president than the president deserves, regardless of who is president. Yeah. And the president always catches shit for
more
things that are
responsibility,
outside
more blame.
of their control.
Yeah, the president gets a lot of credit or blame for like the economy, and largely speaking, like there's not much they can do.
And it is true that like the most economic successes are correlated with Democratic presidents, but to your point, they have very little direct impact. I mean, maybe like outside the Fed, you know, appointing the chairman of the Fed and, you know,
well, they can do chairman
policy.
Of the Fed, but it's not like they can choose interest rates or anything, right?
Right. And it's not like they can fire the chairman if the, you know, because I can't even remember, I think something Powell is the current chairman of the Fed, and he's pissed Biden off a couple of times. Biden's not able to fire him or anything.
Our boy
Jerome Powell, yeah, and he's jacking up interest rates like you would not believe.
Which is good, right?
Well, I'm not an economics guy, but my understanding is isn't the whole point to try to cool off inflation?
Yeah.
Is it working?
Yeah, I think that's kind of the point of interest. It's kind of weird, I think, because like if there's an econ guy that wants to call me out if I'm wrong, you can do it. But like a lot of headlines will come out and they sound really bad, but actually they're good. Like headlines are coming out where it's like U.S. housing market in steep decline, demand for new mortgages dramatically dropping up. But it's like, yeah, that's good. That's what we wanted because the housing market was insanely fucking overheated before. That drop in demand is good. That means that the increase of interest rates is working. Housing prices
the housing market was insane. So I bought a house. So before I moved, I lived in Louisville, and I bought a house in 2020.
God, hold on, wait. How long have you lived there for?
I lived there for 7 years, and then I moved states, moved to a new city back in July. So I had my house less than 2 years, but then when I sold it, I sold it for like an additional $45,000. Like that, the housing market was just insane. And I'm actually glad I sold it when I did because I was terrified at the time I was selling it. I'm like, shit, Powell's about to fuck me because he's raising these interest rates and they're no longer nearly as favorable as they were. But it was I was surprised to the extent to which that homeowners or prospective homeowners were still willing to eat that interest rate.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it was stupid. I think when I bought my house, it was like 2.6 or something, 2.7% interest. And then it was like 6% or something like that when I sold it. So Jesus. But I don't know. So like I said, I haven't been keeping track of that so much. I know like when we got the July CPI report or something like that, it didn't report any additional spikes in inflation. It just stayed constant. And I want to say that I read something a couple of weeks ago that for August, we did see a slight uptick in the CPI again. Have you been tracking? Because I know you're more of a finance guy than I am. Like you keep track of that stuff. Are you seeing inflation like reduce?
I haven't been watching it recently. I don't keep I feel like the keeping tabs of things like constantly, I feel like it's just like it's entertaining, but I don't necessarily feel like it's as informative because people's minds are very recent. So like when we start to get into the House elections, I'll look at everything, but I don't think that people have like this huge granular approach to like, oh, well, gas prices were good, CPI was down. I think it'll be like what's happened over the past like 2 weeks is what people tend to remember the most. So that's probably
and not to sound like nearly, I mean, I know this might be a take that comes off like privilege in the sense, but I don't actually pay attention to gas prices, even though I do drive, right? Like, I mean, if I certainly noticed, but like if there are like slight incremental drops, like apparently it's been dropping pretty consistently for like the past 90 plus days or 100 days. It's like the greatest record rate of gas price decreases.
Yeah.
And I really haven't noticed, as fucked up as that might sound, but I just don't pay attention to it.
Yeah, my chat always got triggered at me when I said this. I don't know if it's because I always drove like compact cars, but when I was working poor, gas prices were never a thing that I cared much about either. Rent and car, it was always, for me at least growing up, it was always car related shit. That was always going to be the thing that kicked my ass. Like if you get a flat tire, if your car needs to be
right,
but I drove
emergencies.
Like a junker. Yeah, like those types of things. But like gas going up like even like 15, 20 cents. Like I'm driving like a Dodge Neon, like this itty bitty Saturn, like my little Volkswagen. Like I'm always driving compact cars, so I never cared much about gas. But I will say though, some of these gas prices like 3 or 4 months ago, I probably would have noticed those. I think down here in Florida, I was seeing gas over like $6 a gallon.
Are you still seeing that?
I don't know because I barely drive and I'm rich.
Right. So like I work from home.
Yeah.
So like that's another thing. Like very often, unless I'm like going out with friends or whatnot, and then very often I just Uber. But I don't pay attention to gas prices. Or like I was watching an episode of The West Wing the other day, and one of the plot points was that the president did not know what the price of milk was, and like there's like this huge somber moment where he has to ask one of his aides, hey, can you do some research and tell me what the price of milk is? Sure. And again, not to sound super privileged, but I don't even know the price of milk. You know, so it's interesting trying to put yourself in the mind of like the average voter who apparently does give us shit about this, right or wrong. Like they are hyper focused on price of gas, the price of milk, and certainly grocery prices since the pandemic, and I think it's mostly due to supply chain issues, but there has been inflation in grocery prices too. I've certainly noticed that, but it's interesting getting back to it, like all the stuff that Biden inherited in so many respects, because inflation's a global phenomenon and gas prices, he has no control over them. I'm on TikTok screaming at people like in lives and going back and forth with people trading videos over the president controlling the price of gas. Do you hear that a lot from like your chat or conservatives?
Or not in my chat, but like, I mean, you saw like the stickers on the pumps, right? Like Biden did this. And it's like, okay, chief.
But like none of like, I don't know, like Southern Fuentes, the Sneeko, the right wingers that you like engage with, they don't say shit like that?
Those guys don't engage with economic stuff at all. They're like, and I actually think this is like a weird phenomenon with Republicans. It kind of feels like, there was is it Krugman or Krugman? I think I always pronounce his name wrong. Either him or somebody else had written an article about like how, or no, it might have been a Substack with no, I don't remember. But like, it feels like the Republicans don't have an economic policy. I don't even think they talk about economics right now. They are like, they're culture warriors. Like that is like their battlefield right now. They don't give a fuck. I don't even know if they care about economics. They are just culture fucking warriors.
No, 100%. I mean, like, Democrats have tried to hit them on this to, varying effect. I think it's effective with some people. But the fact of the matter is, I think for the American electorate, particularly right-wingers, but I think even some left-wingers too, you don't really have to offer an affirmative message. I think Democratic voters expect more of like a robust affirmative message from their supporters than Republican voters do from their candidates. Republicans can just campaign on, own the libs,
maybe. I think it depends.
Let's go Brandon.
I would say that Biden definitely won on like anybody but Trump sentiment, right?
Fair. Yeah, well, yes, but there still wasn't like a full-throated endorsement of him. Like, even, let me put it to you like this. It was my opinion that Democratic voters in 2020 certainly learned lessons from 2016, because one of the common complaints was that, Bernie or busters, and more progressive voters were slow or did not at all rally around Hillary against Trump in the general. Mm-hmm. And certainly I think that we didn't make that mistake to nearly the same extent in 2020 with Biden. But you still have, like, even then, there was a lot of dissent, I feel, among the Democratic base. It was just not going to get in the way of them voting for Biden, unlike in 2020. But Republicans haven't offered a policy agenda in years, except for Rick Scott's. Rick Scott finally unveiled that 5-point or 5-page policy agenda, and Mitch McConnell was pissed because he was like, dude, we don't want to offer anything for Democrats to scrutinize or to pick apart. We just need to be campaigning against Biden. Border crisis, gas prices, weapon or money, the Ukraine situation, even though that's very bipartisan, the support that they get. Mm-hmm. But it's interesting, to your point, that Republicans haven't offered an affirmative economic agenda in years, because even their 2020 technical agenda, the one that you found on the website, mm-hmm. it was from 2016. It was literally copied and pasted. Sure. Because their thoughts were, we're just going to hedge on the incumbency advantage with President Trump and basically just do whatever culture war shit that Trump wanted.
Mm-hmm. It just doesn't seem like, it just feels like all of the issues are more fixated on culture stuff. But I've also been like pretty unplugged from politics recently, so maybe that has changed and I just haven't caught up.
Well, maybe once you get back into it, it's going to be like, it's going to reinvigorate you because you've had like this, you've been fasting from it. It's like a sabbatical. Now you're ready to nourish, Do you think that Democrats, because this also kind of touched into certain parts of your conversation with Beasley and IRI, do you think that Democrats have an opportunity to play culture war issues, maybe not as well as Republicans, but better than they do?
I mean, the one thing that we have to hope is still relevant in people's minds, I would say, is probably going to be like
Roe.
Yeah, for sure. But I don't know how much people are but that was a pretty big one. So
remember, Dalibin, you're my hero.
Well, I actually saw it was an Axios the other day. So for the longest time, Google searches relating to politics, Roe was number 1, mm-hmm. and it's actually dropped to like 18 past the border. Yeah. The border is starting to become more prominent for a lot of people.
Gotcha.
Speaking of which, the border and your governor, Desantis, did you see that he's facing like a criminal investigation from a Texas sheriff?
Was it over the immigrant stuff or what?
Yeah.
Is he actually, when you say facing a criminal investigation, have charges been filed, or what's the?
No, so the sheriff of Bexar County or whatever, it's either San Antonio, Houston, it's whatever county that city occupies. He's opening an investigation into DeSantis for it is interesting because it's like, okay, DeSantis is the governor of Florida. You are a Texas sheriff. I'm not sure how, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know enough about the law.
You need standing to sue. Like, you can't just bring random charges over random shit, right?
Would you be surprised if the Department of Justice looked into it? Because I watched an interview with Brian Tyler Cohen and he's a former like U.S. attorney or something like that. Glenn Kirshner. Have you ever heard of him? He's like constantly making rounds on MSNBC, CNN, doing legal commentary.
No, but I don't know how much stock I put into people like that. But what about him?
Well, fair enough. So anyway, so Brian Tyler Cohen asked him, he's like, okay, well, look, DeSantis and Abbott are in, potentially in deep shit over this. Mm-hmm. Do you think that Merrick Garland might investigate? And Kirshner said he would be surprised if Garland was not looking into opening an investigation for what DeSantis did, because those immigrants, those Venezuelan migrants, were here applying for asylum, so they were here legally, and he shipped them from, because I want to say they went from Texas, they stopped off in Florida,
okay,
and then they went to Martha's Vineyard. So he took them across like 2 different state boundaries, three state lines.
Gotcha.
And Martha's Vineyard is not a sanctuary city, and Massachusetts, to my knowledge, isn't even a sanctuary state. Boston is a sanctuary city, but like they're talking about like human trafficking charges or kidnapping charges because
that would be pretty fucking funny,
them.
but yeah.
Well, given the what Trump's under investigation for, do you think that it would be? I'm not asking you for the legal commentary, but just from a political commentary perspective, do you think it would be a bad idea for? Because there's this line of logic that says Garland's got his hands full with Trump.
Yeah.
This is unprecedented. Even though it seems to be going well for the Department of Justice, that's still a former president. He's the darling of the Republican Party. If you then open an investigation during an election year against the other darling of the Republican Party, would that piss off the base even more? Like, would that be biting off more than you could chew, even if you could make the legal case? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I don't know. These are all really, really tough questions. I don't have good answers. Even regardless of that, actually, even just the Trump stuff on its own, it's really hard to talk about like using like actual criminal investigations into potential future political candidates. I don't know what politically, you probably leave that stuff alone, but like legally, it's probably important to be able to address it, right? You don't want somebody to feel like they're above the law just because they're running for office. Garland has basically come out and said, like, I'm like, I don't care about politics. I'm going to do legally whatever, the office commands of me, basically whatever's right.
Without fear or favor was his quote.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's what he's saying, but yeah.
Well, that was kind of the bulk of what kind of tripped me up in your conversation with IRI, because my understanding is you've not committed one way or another, again, not in terms of the legal basis, but whether or not you think it's a good idea or whether or not you would support Trump's indictment. Or did I misunderstand
I'm like
you?
50-50, I'm like 50-50 split on that. I
Okay.
truly don't know. Like, I could be tipped either way. Like, somebody could, like, if somebody says charges are not worth it because like that might be what sets off literally the Civil War, is Trump gets charged and convicted and can't run, and now you've got like an intelligence agency essentially, or our legal agencies basically barring the most popular Republican candidate from running, and now you've like thrown the country into chaos. Or I could see somebody saying like the concept of like, yeah, maybe that would be the case, but Trump's earned it. Like, he had plenty of communication with our federal offices. They asked him to turn the stuff back in. He didn't. Like, whatever happens, even if bad stuff does happen, it's Trump's fault. Like, he had every opportunity. Yeah.
That is exactly where I expected you to land on this issue, because I thought you were going through this virtue ethics arc where it was like principle is principle regardless of how impractical or inconvenient it was. And so I guess easier said than done. But
yeah, I mean, that's what I lean towards. But like, man, that would just be, it's just a scary world where you've got to, like, you understand that's like it is the perfect line for Republicans. Like, all of the intelligence agencies are against you. The swamp has rigged everything. And now the FBI has prevented Donald Trump.
Oh, yeah. I mean, they were saying that before this, but yeah, exactly, this would be further.
Like, they couldn't rig the elections. Well, now they're trying to get them in the courts, and it's like, Jesus, fuck. So it's it's scary. Yeah.
Do you think, okay, again, with all of the prominent right wingers with which you engage, like I told you months ago, I had a conversation with Rob Dorn. I got my ass kicked. I was ill prepared for it. I was totally taken aback at how effective he was at what he did. Mm-hmm. But Rob is someone who I would argue believes in just like he is knee deep in conspiracy,
Absolutely. Very good at arguing it, yeah.
Extremely, very effective. And but what about, again, like these other like major thought leaders? Like, I don't know, like is Tim Pool like big into the whole the election was rigged and the deep states against Trump, or Fuentes or Lauren Southern, Sneeko? Do they all believe that?
Yeah, everybody you just named, I think, will do like standard populist, right-wing populist talking points. So probably, yeah.
You don't think any of them, though, like, do you think you could even get any of them to say in the abstract that of course they support law enforcement punishing investigating, charging Republican Republican officials if those people commit crimes? Like, take Trump out of the equation.
I'd have to sit down and ask each of them. Taking Trump out of the equation is impossible, because what is the number one thing that you think they would all say as soon as you ask that question?
Oh, they defer to Trump. I'm sure they would.
Well, no. Like, if you ask them about, like, is it fair to charge Trump? What do you think the first thing they would all say is?
I assume they would say no, because they think that the charges are baseless.
Oh, not even that. They would say, well, what about Hillary? That's the first thing they would all do.
Oh, yeah.
Or they'd say, what about
go down that rabbit hole?
Yep.
Hillary, the fact that she was investigated for 2.5 years, and the FBI, led by a Republican, deigned not to charge her. And then the one that people tend to forget is the fact that under Trump, she was investigated during, I'm pretty sure it was during Obama's final year or two, right? Because it was before and during the election. And then a Trump inspector general in 2018 reviewed Comey's case against Hillary and came to the same conclusion. They're like, she acted recklessly, but we support Comey's decision not to charge Clinton. So what if you bring that stuff up? Like you point out, no, she was investigated. And Trump
I've already watched Rob Noor squirm through this conversation. There's just nothing you can say to convince these people. They're not.
That's him though. That's where I'm curious. Because I don't know much about Sneeko, very little about Fuentes. I've seen a lot of your stuff with Lauren Southern, and isn't there a gradient though, of reasonableness there? I feel like you could get Southern on that maybe, or maybe not.
So we watched the 100 or the 1,000. Is it 2,000 Mules? And she seemed.
You watched the Dinesh D'Souza movie. You watched it?
Yeah, with her.
How was it?
It was atrocious. And she seemed at the end of that where she was saying that this is bullshit. It's really stupid. I don't know where she would fall on everything. My guess is Fuentes would say it might be bullshit, it might not be, but winning the ideological war is the most important thing. So even if there's a little bit of truth sacrifice that has to happen there, we can do that. His answer would be the same essentially as Vaush's. For Sneeko, he would just say that everything's rigged and he wouldn't engage with any of the subject material at all. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Just
I mean, I don't know.
For the vast majority of populist type people, they're not really looking to engage with the fact of the matter about anything. Most of them just truly don't understand. Do you know what Fresh and Fit is?
Is that No Jumper? I see No Jumper stuff on my news feed where they interview I saw one with Aaron Carter the other day.
They basically do Red Pill podcast stuff, but it was interesting.
Men's rights activists and how to get bitches and stuff like that.
A little bit, yeah, kind of, yeah. But they basically do stuff like that. But it was really interesting because one of the guys, the quote unquote smart guy on that show, it used to be would I say he's a populist? He's a Trump fan.
Is this the Marvin guy? Marvin? Because I have some notes about that.
Myron.
Oh, whatever. Yeah. My bad.
But he used to be he worked for the Department of Homeland Security. So it was very, very, very interesting getting his perspective on things, because even though he is a pretty populist dude, because of his federal experience, he at the very least has a good understanding of how the agencies work. So even though maybe he might be a little bit more politically inclined to push a certain narrative, he knows it's okay, well, hold on. When you work at the FBI, there's not a fucking meeting happening every day where they're talking about how to fuck over the American people. These people are nowhere near as competent as some conspiracy theorists seem to think they are. And most of the guys working are just normal, decent. These are American people. They're normal, decent humans. Are they going to be doing some shady shit for their job sometimes? Yeah, sure. But rigging elections or trying to get American citizens. The average Fed is not going to have the consciousness for that. They're not going to.
Myron's the one that you talked to with Sneeko, right? Recently, I want to say I saw a video about that because I think it came up when you talked with Beasley, and I want to make sure I'm talking about the same person because
most likely, yeah.
Later on, okay. So one of the things I know you've talked about this before, and it's really interesting on the conspiracy angle, and charges against Trump. There's going to be another January 6th hearing, I think, in 2 days. There's at least one more. And so obviously you're going to see, it's going to be a resurgence of, fake news, conspiracy, the deep state's acting again. And I've heard you make this point, and I wonder if somebody like Myron would be very effective at making this case that the level of conspiracy that that skeptics are alleging, the amount of pieces that would have to fall into place to steal an election or to, conspire to make all these cases against Trump, that's a level of conspiracy I don't think it's possible and I'm sure you don't either in 2022 with smartphones and, recording devices and things like that. This isn't
And I also wish that not to do this cringe Bayesian all the time, but any one of these conspiracies that you're alleging on its own, even one of them would be the biggest conspiracy of all time in the history of like
100%.
international politics. Just one of them. But you're alleging that like 5 of them are happening. So many different grand conspiracies that were one of these on their own would be like internationally like the biggest shit ever. Yeah, it's just insane.
Well, no, I mean, like, it's funny you think about it. Like, when I think of conspiracy, I'm thinking of Watergate, 50 years ago when basically recording technology was like a phonograph. You know what I mean? It was some guy with like some sort of crank film, and that shit was discovered. You know what I mean? Like the whistle was blown on that with relatively primitive technology on an infinitely smaller scale, because there was just a couple of operatives breaking into the Watergate building. What you're talking about is like encompasses all 50 states, coast to coast, 330 million people, or however many voters there are.
Yeah.
It is madness. It reminds me of like I've been on a Marvel kick here lately, going back and watching like the Marvel movies, and Cap 2 is the best Marvel movie. Just FYI, it's objectively the case, and I hope you don't disagree.
Gotcha.
But like the big Hydra reveal, that Hydra was behind everything for 70 years, and it was growing its way inside Shield. Like when I watched that, I'm thinking, oh, this is what Trump voters believe. Like this is the kind of I don't know. I mean, the Hillary and Hunter Biden whaboutisms are really frustrating. Hillary, to me, is relatively easy to debunk because, again, she's been investigated. But even like Hunter Biden, did you ever go and look at that footage that happened a couple months ago? Got Sam Harris in a ton of trouble because he... You did watch that? What did you think of that? I'm curious because I never heard you comment on that. It was a bad
classic Destiny miss. He was just a little bit too hyperbolic. It was a really bad take.
He did. He went hard in the paint. Like it was funny because there were a couple of F-bombs short of being you, but now that you say that was definitely like...
I gave a take similar to this a long time ago where I said because I was so frustrated over the Garland stuff. I was like, if the Rebecca Christine Ford shit was faked, Democrats should make up fake allegations to get Kavanaugh kicked out because fuck them.
Yeah.
That would have been like my equivalent take that I gave a long time ago to that, which is not good. You shouldn't do that, obviously.
No. I mean, obviously, it's super fucked up, especially when there are perfectly legitimate grounds to, not. Yeah.
It's rough though when you are playing against like actors that are acting in really, really bad faith. Like it demands a really high level of moral character in order to fight principally against that kind of stuff. I think it does, but fight is worth it, but it's hard, yeah.
It may but see, one of the things that Harris said during that conversation that I found fascinating, because it's true. Do you agree that even as somebody who didn't vote for Trump, didn't vote for Trump in 2016, you didn't vote for him in 2020, you don't like him, obviously, but do you ever get desensitized to all the shit that he's done? Like,
yeah, a lot. It was hard to strike that line because in one sense you don't want to normalize it, but if you bring it up all the time, you look deranged. So it was very difficult, like figuring out how to cover Trump because he's doing.
But Harris made the case, though.
Yeah, go ahead.
Harris made that case that any one of those instances, like when you're trying to cover him, was individually the equal of the Hunter Biden laptop scandal, like the Trump University. Sure. Before he became president,
or more, really. Because I still don't think anything of note came out of like the Hunter Biden laptop stuff. Do you? Did I miss anything?
I think he just likes doing and sending pics. But
like the Burisma stuff is like, why would you put him on a board? It's like the guy's already been on a ton of fucking board. What do you mean? Like just because you're on a board doesn't mean you have to work a fucking factory. Like that's not how these boards work. Like
sure,
everything.
That's nepotism, but yeah.
No, it's not even nepotism. It's just like it's how these boards work. Like if I was doing some sort of international work and I could get any type of like political figure to sit on a board, of course I would. It gives me good negotiating power. They probably got a lot of connections at Washington. Like there's a way that you can call it nepotism, but the reality is they're connected, right? And that's what you're looking for when it comes to like getting people to sit on some of the boards of these companies. And Hunter had already had experience on prior boards. Like, why wouldn't you have somebody like this? Like,
I didn't know he had a background with that sort of thing. I thought he was just an attorney. Isn't he an attorney? I assume he's an attorney.
I don't remember if he was an attorney or not, but I know he'd sat on like other boards before. And I know that he's like obviously like pretty connected in Washington, but
I guess on that subject, on the Harris thing though, I agree that he was hyperbolic and he overstated it. I think he said something like, I don't care if there were like pictures of dead or something in the Hunter Biden laptop. Like he got quite hyperbolic, but I think too much was made of that because that's the sort of thing I feel like you would hear from Charlie Kirk or, Steven Crowder, or maybe not Ben Shapiro, but like in terms of, even Ben Shapiro, who would always say like, I'm not an ever Trumper, I'm not an always Trumper, I'm a sometimes Trumper. He was clearly willing to put his thumb on the scale if he thought his his preferred political outcomes would be achieved, right? Like he saw Trump as a useful tool to get his desired political outcomes. So why is what Harris said so bad if it's kind of the same sort of methodology, the lesser of two evils, that sort of paradigm?
Typically we hold ourselves on the left when it comes to at least democratic principles. We hold ourselves to much higher standards. And so if we're going to make those types of charges against the right, they're going to hold us to that standard. They pretend that they're on the same level, but they're not. So we just have to be careful, I think, when we make those types of claims.
You think he lost credibility? Like, because I don't want to say he was a darling of the right, but he was certainly someone that the right would often appeal to as like a reasonable
for Sam Harris
lefty, or yeah.
I don't think Sam Harris has been like that for a long time.
Well,
Sam Harris was actually, I actually thought that Sam Harris was a grifting fucking loser, but he kind of took the same path as me, just in the opposite direction. I thought that the right had gone too far, and I pushed back against them a lot, so people thought I was a communist. He thought the left went too far, so he pushed back a lot against them, but so people thought he was like far right. But Sam Harris has always been massively against Donald Trump. I don't think Sam Harris was ever in favor of Trump.
He's never wavered in that. You're 100% correct. So, like, what I mean is, when I say that he was somebody that the right tolerated or that the right would appeal to at times, because he spends a lot of time, maybe not so much now,
basically.
Correct.
Yep.
Correct. So do you think he's lost like whatever ground or credibility that he had with them?
With conservatives?
Yeah, by saying what he said.
I think I could be wrong, but I don't think he's had ground with conservatives for a long time. I just think they've always seen him as like having Trump derangement syndrome.
And I like what you call it, TD. Is it TDSS?
Yeah, Trump derangement
syndrome.
Where you write off every single valid criticism of Trump as Trump derangement syndrome. Yeah.
Well, so I guess getting to that point, though, he did make, I think, maybe not a compelling case, but he definitely reminded me, and it's somebody who also doesn't like Trump and is very vocal against the Trump strain of the Republican Party, that if you lay out the litany of Trump's like moral, ethical, or potentially legal failures, any single one of them are the equal to or superior, to your point, of anything that can be laid at Biden's feet, let alone if you take the shit in the aggregate, right?
Yeah.
So is there a way?
Yeah, like people like the sorry, I actually get
no, go ahead.
I get triggered. Could you imagine if Hunter Biden played a similar role in President Biden's affairs as fucking Jared Kushner did with Donald Trump? They would lose it. The Republicans would fucking lose it. It would be fucking over. And then not to mention how much the like all the crazy figures in the Trump. Could you imagine if anybody near Biden had gone to jail for the charges that fucking Manafort did with Ukraine, right? or the weird shit with fucking Kellyanne Conway, and like the lying to the FBI with Flynn, all the crazy shit that Stone's been involved in? Like, yeah, there's only one of these things with Trump would have buried Biden in the eyes of the Republicans. But there were like so many unbelievable things. It was like a circus. Trump literally, he was a fan of my stream, because what I tell streamers every day is if you're caught in some huge shit, you just got to keep streaming and ignore it, and people will forget it. And that's what Trump did. He showed up to work every day, and he's like, Trump, didn't you do some wild shit 2 days ago? Yeah,
I know what you're talking about, fake news.
Yeah, or he do fake
news. Like, he'd look you dead in the eye and go, no, I didn't say that.
Yeah, what did he say? The polls are real, but the news is fake? Like, he would just say the craziest fucking shit all the time.
Or he'd hold up pictures of his inauguration crowd. He's like, isn't this clearly bigger than Obama's? And we're like,
why are you even lying about this shit, dude? Why do you care? Yeah, it's just, he's a wild. It's just wild. And covering him is wild. It's very challenging. Yeah.
Well, I can't imagine what it was, because I didn't, when the 2016 election was going on, I was getting all my stuff from like what you guys call like normie sources. So Chris Cuomo, Chris Wallace, people in like, Shepard Smith and stuff. I had no idea that this world even existed. And so I can't imagine what it was like, because you were covering politics at the time, right? Like when Trump was elected, not during his presidency, I know you covered him then, but like in 2015 and 2016 when he was running for office, were you covering that, or were you still?
Yeah, I was. Yeah, that's when I started to cover politics for real. Yeah, basically. Yeah.
Has the discourse changed in those 7 years, or is it basically the same? Because I assumed, I remember the Mitt Romney John McCain. I know you do too, but all that stuff, all my commentary then was offline, and I was engaging in personal conversations with people. I feel like the discourse has basically been like, as soon as Trump came in, like I'm not going to say he was the source of it, but like he caused a shift, and I don't think it's vacillated much at all. It's been the way it's been for the past 7 years, or has it gotten worse, or has it gotten better?
What do you mean by when you say the discourse?
So I recall during the 2012 election cycle and stuff like that, not that it didn't get heated, but like I remember, I'm sure you do too, the fairly robust debates and conversations and commentary between like Romney and Obama. In fact, Romney kicked Obama's ass their first debate. I remember that very clearly. You had Biden, kicking Paul Ryan's ass in their first and only debate, but it was very substantive. There was a lot of policy exchanges. It was rhetorically sophisticated, and the commentary around it in the mainstream media, was also fairly sophisticated. And I don't want to say good faith, but certainly, but you didn't have Kellyanne Conway on the news, saying some wild shit and trying to spin some wild shit because it wasn't emanating from the candidates. Trump changed that. So my question is, like, you clearly recognize the difference in political discourse.
Yeah, the Trump stuff
was
crazy, and all the administration, the tone that he set, what felt more kind of like a little bit like a wacky movie. Like, LOL, this is like a parody of fascism or some like wacky shit like that, basically. Yeah, that's definitely a difference. That are you asking, like, if it's still like that, or
if it is as much like that as it was when it first started, or has it gotten worse? Like in 2015 and 2016, when Trump became the front runner and then the candidate.
I mean, we haven't seen. I think what we were all kind of waiting for is to see if, like, would the Trump style be emulated? It doesn't seem like that's the case yet. Like, Desantis does not speak or act like Trump, right?
No, I agree. Rhetorically, he doesn't. But you do see his flourishes echoed in less prominent politicians, but like Carrie Lake, the lady running for governor in Arizona, like she has a lot of Trump affectations. Like, she'll use a lot of the slogans, fake news, and she's abrasive with the press, and she's combative, and she curses, and she insults, and she's an election denier and all that stuff. But I agree on a national level, DeSantis, who is the second tier candidate, he is not like that rhetorically. I agree. I just didn't know if, like, when you were engaging with right wingers at the time, if basically it's exactly the same, or if they've gotten more committed to it and discourse is more coarsened, or if it's basically been stuck in what you do for the past 7 years.
I don't know. It's hard to say without, like, I think we'll be able to tell when this election season comes up, like, where the rhetoric is at, when we're seeing like a lot of Republicans pushing for it, right? Because we're going to be seeing, like, our Trump-backed candidates, or like the Trumple people, going to be winning more, or is it going to be like more establishment people? Like, I think we'll probably see that. Yeah.
Going back a bit, do you think that you think we could get you to commit to the idea, as uncomfortable as it might make you, that Merrick Garland is doing the right, like, commit to the idea, not entertain it, commit to it, that Merrick Garland is doing the right thing by investigating Trump and pursuing this regardless of the outcome?
I mean, that's probably the direction I lean. Yeah.
What would it take? Like, would you basically need to see evidence that the voter base would be?
No, it really shouldn't. That really shouldn't matter, should it? Right?
No, I agree, but like, I mean, you have practical concerns, which I think are fair. Which is okay.
I don't know. Well, that's the issue. The issue isn't what the practical concerns are. The issue is, should the practical concerns matter? That's really the question, right?
Right. And on your virtue ethics arc, it shouldn't. And it's not actually
even just on any arc. Like, I mean, like, I don't know if practical concerns like that, like, should the president be allowed to be above the law for political sake, right? The answer to that should probably always be no, I would imagine.
I think we could no, I agree with you. It shouldn't. I'm trying to play the devil's advocate here. I guess I would say it might. I definitely want Trump pursued, as long as there's a legal case to be made, regardless of the outcome. I don't imagine that we'd see like a civil war from it or whatnot, but I agree with Garland's remarks that, without fear or favor, and he's not going to give any regard to, well, what if Trump runs in 2024? What if this causes a huge backlash? He's like, I don't care. We got to follow the law. I respect that, and that's where I am. But I'm biased. I don't like Trump. I want to see a repudiation of him because the party hasn't repudiated him. So I feel like
but
the
be
law
careful.
has to do it.
No, that shouldn't.
Yes.
That's not the place of the legal system. The legal system is not a place for us to enforce our political.
Well, no, but I'm
right?
talking about my personal investment in. I don't think I would give. Okay,
Well, even your personal investment. I don't want Trump to not be president because he did some illegal shit. I want the American people to not favor Trump. That's what I would want. I think you should want the same, right?
Well, a couple of things. So, like, okay, for example, let's go back to Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton, I think technically, you'd have to probably get Pisco in here. He technically committed perjury when he lied about the that Monica Lewinsky gave him.
Well,
so he broke.
He didn't technically. He just did, right?
He just did, right?
Yeah.
So it depends on what is. What your definition of is, I think is what he said. But anyway, he broke the law. Mm-hmm. But because it was over a, and of course I was also like 8 years old at the time, I don't give a shit. You know what I mean? Like I'm not saying it's right, but I'm not nearly as animated, or I can't imagine I would have been nearly as animated about it if I were a 31-year-old at the time. Mm-hmm. Like, oh my God, the president lied under oath. Damn, that sucks. He should be punished, but it's also about a blowjob, so it's not like it's the end of the world. But what Trump's accused of doing could very well have led to the end of the republic, or at least certainly contributed to its end to a far greater extent than what President Clinton did.
For sure.
I think that's reasonable to factor into how much you give a shit. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think that's unreasonable.
Sure, I'm not saying that you can't feel differently about the types of charges brought or anything. I'm just saying that, like, we generally don't want our political disagreements to be resolved by our legal system. That's a pretty...
No, I agree that that's not ideal, but I do think that if he were to be successfully charged and prosecuted, that would be... I do think that the law has a place when it comes to helping enforce social norms. It's not just law, right? Isn't the law basically, in its grandest sense, social norms codified, like enforced by law enforcement? Isn't that what the purpose of law is? Like, there's a strong correlation between our values,
yeah, of course,
and our social norms.
Yeah, law's downstream from morality, and morality, social norms, all that. Yeah, of course.
Right. So I do think that law has a place for it. I agree that it's not... I do agree that the law shouldn't be the first place for it, but I do agree that the law has a place in eliminating threats, and Donald Trump is the single biggest threat to the country, and the party that backs him, I think, is also, like, you can bring that in there. And if people won't, let me put it like this: if he lost resoundingly, if he had fewer votes in 2020 than he did in 2016, if there was a clear and decisive message from the rank and file Republican voter, from the Republican leadership, we're done with you, we screwed up, you took it way too far, you have no career in politics ahead of you, fuck you. If it was like a strong repudiation, I would not be nearly as invested in Garland prosecuting Trump. I'm not saying that he would be right to ignore it. I'm just saying I would care less. I would be less invested in it. I hope that makes sense. I hope that's reasonable.
Possible. Yeah, maybe, yeah.
Yeah. Where's I going with this?
I was kind of asking about how, like, we probably shouldn't use our legal system to solve political differences.
Yeah, because, well, I don't even know. I don't know if some of these things, like, I remember reading an article about like the classified documents thing. I don't know if Trump can be barred from running for president. I want to say that there's like a dispute about that. Like, in the grand scheme of things,
it depends on what the specific charge he gets convicted of is. But I think some of those US 18 charges, I think, or USC 18 charges, I think some of those bar you or disbar you or whatever from running again. I think, but I'd have to go check. I don't remember.
Well, let's take Trump out of the equation. And as far as like the midterms are concerned, even without him, I feel like there's like a downstream ripple effect that we're going to be dealing with for a while. Did you know, like, it's like 1 out of 3 or 2 out of 3. I had the note written somewhere and I misplaced it, but the GOP frontrunners for governorships and secretaries of state this election cycle, that they're election deniers, 1 out of 3 or 2 out of 3.
Nice.
Dude, that's terrifying. As somebody who like loves these institutions, you're like a based institutionalist, that should scare the shit out of you.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, obviously. that's why I think that the current wave of like the Trump stuff is probably like the biggest threat to, I guess, like U.S. anything, yeah, to the United States.
Let's see. What? In your conversation with Beasley, and we're going to cross streams here. I'm glad you said that, because you said something that it triggered me. It upset me, and that was you said something to the effect of that the stuff that's coming from the left is getting close to or almost as bad as what's coming from the right in terms of the left's censorious nature versus the right's anti-democratic nature. You said that the left is, I don't want to put words in your mouth. You didn't say they're equal, but you said
no.
it's
Yeah, I understand.
close.
The reason why is because he's referencing conversations I'm having with people like Sneeko. The conversations that I'm having in those regards are like very culturally minded. In which case that's probably true. But like in terms of like breaking down like existential threats to like democratic or liberal freedoms widely speaking in the United States, I think most of those like social conversations, people just aren't really interested in those conversations. It's just not what they're talking about. But yeah, if I was someone like a legal,
you mean the threats posed to institutions? That's
Yes.
that's not what like Sneeko.
yeah, like Sneeko, Fresh and Fit,
on.
like these guys aren't thinking. They're thinking about like who's canceling who on Twitter, or like who's rigging, like Hollywood to have a lot of trans actors and like that's like kind of where they're at, I think.
Okay, well then let me ask you this then, because I understand that if that's where they are, that's where you have to meet them, and you certainly have opinions on that, and you've been affected. I mean, I can't imagine, your friend got, banned the other day. I'm sorry to see him go. The Omni Liberal, I don't know if you've heard of him.
He came into this world knowing he wasn't long for it, so it's okay.
Dude, but he was like, he posted a lot of pictures of your wife. It was very strange, like the level of engagement that guy had.
Well, I think they're close friends. I'm in an open relationship.
Are they?
Okay, yeah,
Oh, well, all right, well, if you're cool with that. But no, so like, I understand that that's the world very much that you occupy, but do you ever not get irritated with Sneeko or whoever when they don't take the institution? Okay, because again, you're an institutionalist, and when they're talking about who's canceling who, Andrew Tate got banned, like, are you not going like, dude, holy we've got bigger fish to fry?
It's tempting to say that.
Or do you agree with them?
It's tempting to say that, but the reality is that different people engage with different things in different ways. What a worthless fucking sentence. Let me
That's
be
beautiful.
more.
Well said.
Let me be more specific with that.
There's a lovely tautology there.
Yes.
Yes.
Something that I used to repeat a lot on stream, and there are still some people in the political world that repeat this, is people care about meat and potatoes issues, tabletop issues. They want to talk about their bills, their finances, et cetera. People don't care about like the culture wars. That is something that's often said. It is dead wrong. There are a lot of poor people that have a lot of economic anxiety who will be single issue voters over certain types of culture war issues. So to a lot of people, culture war is like the start and stop of their engagement with politics. There are a lot of poor people that would vote to fuck themselves over and over again, as long as it meant they didn't have like a pro-abortion candidate in office or something, So knowing that's the case, some people, just because of where they're at in their life, the type of engagement they have with their world, with the United States political world, they just don't really give a fuck about like democracy or voting. Like a lot of these people couldn't tell you how the government works at all. If you've got somebody that doesn't understand the function of the Supreme Court, like I would guess, my guess is going to be that probably like 50 to 70% of Americans, or probably like 50% of Americans couldn't really tell you what the Supreme Court does, really. They would probably just like,
I think you're being awfully generous there. Yeah. You're probably right, though.
Yeah, they'd probably say, it's like the last, maybe if they're smart, they'd say like the last appeal court, maybe, or it's like the final judge you see. But so like if that's the case, like I can't sit here and hammer home, like Trump's like threat to liberalism with a capital L when most people don't know what liberalism is. They'd be like, what, like a threat to Democrats, liberals? Like that would be it. So yeah, that's why I tend to stay away from those issues on those platforms. Even though I would agree, it is frustrating. People talk about like, like the left wants to cancel everybody. And it's like, in my opinion, in my lifetime, the worst type of cancellation that I've heard of was the president of the United States saying the media is the enemy of the people. That's one of the scariest really statements that's probably ever been uttered by a U.S. president. That's an unbelievably frightening statement, but nobody gives a fuck about that because it's not like getting banned from Twitter,
Well, but see, okay, there again, I'm imagining I'm playing armchair quarterback here, but I wonder if there's a way to, do you ever watch Steven Seagal movies?
I've seen them before, yeah.
Okay. He practiced like judo, right? Like, using enemy momentum against them, except he would do it in really stupid looking ways.
Not judo.
It is judo, you son of a...
No, it's not judo. What's it
called?
Oh God, what's it called? Aikido. That's what he did. He did Aikido.
You're right. That's what I said. I said Aikido.
Yeah.
You said
oh,
judo.
sorry. It was your mic was like because you were away from your microphone. Yeah. But okay, go ahead.
Yeah, that's what it would. No. Yeah, you were right. But no, like, so what if there's a way to do that? I wonder with them in argument, because clearly there's some common ground there. You get frustrated by certain censorious elements on the left, just like they do. And I did see a clip of your conversation with Sneeko and Myron, and you did bring this up about how the right has censorious inclinations too. Is there a way to say, look, I agree, it's super cringe when the left wants to cancel for whatever reason, blah, blah, blah. But what do you think about, is there a way to pivot, or do you just lose them after the buzz?
The problem is that like you can pivot, but then you're gonna have to fight a whole bunch on like factual grounds too. Because you say, well, don't you think it's a problem? Because here's how that conversation would go. They're gonna be like, well, like it's that the left is canceling everybody across all of social media, blah, blah, blah. It's like, okay, yeah, but like, don't you think it's kind of crazy that like Trump was attacking the media? They would say, no, that was totally right, because the media was unfairly attacking Trump at every single turn. And then you're going to have to start like peeling through like examples of that. And that's going to be like a whole other fight that you have to have, basically.
One of the things on that tangent, because I watched that clip and Beasley was talking to you about it. I thought you did a really good job pushing back again on pointing out how the right has historically had censorious inclinations too. Do you think there's any ground to be gained, though, by also pointing out in conjunction that the right has not only engaged in the kind of censorship that they say is the exclusive province of the left, or that the left is exclusively doing now, so that's one mark against the right, but also the fact that the right has set the stage. Like I call it, they're hoisted by their own petard, right? Because for decades, it's been the Republican Party, it's been conservatives who've essentially wanted to unshackle businesses from government regulation that they...
Dude, I used to bring this shit up all the time. Like
at-will employment, the right to, provide certain services to people or not, just based on, like, if you don't want to bake a gay couple a cake, that's your right to do.
If you want to discriminate against somebody for the color of their skin, it's okay, but God forbid Twitter ban you because you're a conservative. It's like, are you fucking serious? That's what it took for you to think that like businesses might have too much control over some things? Like, that's insane to me. Yeah. But I mean,
is there a way to get any sort of concession there or realignment there? You know what? You're right. Like when we were wielding the sword, we were happy to cut down anyone in our path, metaphorically speaking. But then when the sword changes hands, we don't like that all that much. So you know what?
I think it's difficult because for a lot of these people, like the newer breed of Republicans would probably disagree with the older ones. They might say that. Like the Tea Party and onward Republicans are going to break really hardcore from the neoconservative like obsession with big business and trickle down economics. So they're probably like, oh yeah, well when Republicans did it in the past, that was wrong too. Those aren't real.
Do you think so? So like again, I know you're not a psychic, but I'm just curious. Like you think, I'm just going to use some of the same names. You think like Fuentes and Sneeko and Southern and Myron would say, they would say, you know what? No, a business doesn't have the right to not bake a cake.
Yes.
For a gay couple.
The newer types of everybody that you just named, I would argue falls into the newer populist type of Republican. And the populist type of Republican is far, far, far different than the neoconservatives that existed under George Bush. Under George Bush, big business was king. It was the proudest things we had in the United States. We should do everything we can to suck off big businesses. But the newer populists are very anti-corporate. They don't like the big corporations. They think that they fuck us over. They're the ones that are railing against like ExxonMobil even and stuff like that, while also saying that they should be able to drill, but they think that like the big businesses are also corrupt and they buy off politicians and they hoard their wealth and they fuck over working people, et cetera, et cetera. So, yeah.
Well, I mean, I guess that's potentially promising. I mean, even though if they're consistent in the application of their principles, at least in that regard, I mean, there's ground for the left. I mean, because then you can have, like right now, I think that, I don't know how far it got, but I know that there have been multiple hearings where the heads of these like social media companies like Zuckerberg and others were, dragged in front of the Senate and the House, and they were getting grilled left, right, and center by Republicans and Democrats for like the first time in decades. I mean, Democrats are always inclined to, chew out big businesses, at least publicly. Republicans are finally on board with it because they feel that their content is being censored, even though people like Ben Shapiro and Michael Knowles and Candace Owens are kicking ass on YouTube still in terms of engagement. But the line is they're being censored. So now they've got skin in the game. And so it's interesting to see these hearings where Zuckerberg's getting yelled at by AOC. And then the next person might be Thomas Massey from Kentucky, a crazy right winger. And he's also chewing Zuckerberg out. So I wonder if there is a way for, in terms of both policy and also in terms of like commentary and like social engagement, if there's a way to get people as disparate as Sneeko and Southern on board with, I don't know, whoever we would say on the left, whatever, in this respect, that companies should be shackled and regulated somewhat, that they shouldn't be given carte blanche to do whatever they want? Do you think?
No, I think at the end of the day, I don't think anybody cares about this. I think that they all just care about what's happening currently. I think that if social media companies were more favorable to conservatives, they wouldn't give a fuck at all about it. They would never be talking about Section 2.
No, I agree. So, but
like,
I guess what I'm saying is, do you think there's an opportunity now, while conservatives don't feel that these companies are favorable towards them? Like, is there something to be seized in this short term to like rebuild antitrust laws and things like that, and kind of like break up, these social media monopolies, come crack down a bit on Facebook, crack down a bit on Twitter? That would seem to please antitrust Democrats off, and would also please Republicans who feel that those companies are discriminating against them for their political beliefs.
Well, but if we wanted to, as Democrats, go after big business, it wouldn't just be the social media companies, right? We probably want to do more things as well, right? But the
100%.
Republicans would be on board with it.
I wonder if there's something targeted that could be done. Are you, with midterms approaching, you spent quite a bit of effort in 2020, I know, in Georgia, right? You weren't, or Nebraska and Georgia.
Yep.
Are you done with that shit after what happened with the Nebraska thing? Or?
I don't know. We'll see what happens.
Gotcha. I don't know. The stakes are pretty dire here. And we talked about this before, and that's why I'm interested to see, as you engage more on the political commentary side of things, because I think you could easily make the case that this is going to be like the biggest midterm, the most consequential midterm election in at least modern history. I'm not going to say
it seems like that's how they all are, huh?
Well, it does seem like that. It seems like a constant like escalation. It's like, the latest movie where it's like it's this level threat, and then the next one has to escalate even further. But it is, you've got election deniers running for offices that they could either obstruct, alter, or just outright alter or change the outcome of an election. Republicans control 30 out of 50 state legislatures. That Moore v. Harper independent state legislature doctrine thing, that's going to be decided in October. It's going to be heard in October, and then decided in January. And that could essentially unshackle Republican state legislatures and Democrats, but there are more Republican state legislatures, to rewrite voter laws, voter maps in their states without judicial oversight. And it's like, the only help, I don't see any limiting principle from the Republican Party. I agree that Desantis and Trump have a lot of differences, and as a matter of fact, we're starting to see a bit of that schism kind of reanimate, because people in Trump's orbit have criticized DeSantis for what he did with the Venezuelan migrants. You had Jared Kushner of all people on Fox News saying, I think at the end of the day that you got to remember that these migrants are people and they're not political pawns. And,
they are political. Nobody gives a fuck about them at the end.
No, I know, but sure, but they're taking the chance to shiv DeSantis in the press because he's a rival. But I don't see any limiting principle in terms of notions of like maximizing voter turnout, sticking with like long held traditions like the peaceful transfer of power. I'm not convinced, and I've seen no signs that would indicate that this ends in 2022 or even in 2024. As long as Republicans are convinced that they can't win, or that they're less likely to win with a popular vote, and that they won't get punished for trying to overturn elections or to change voter laws, I think that's exactly what they're going to try to do. So this is huge, man. And I don't want to be doom or pilled, but statistics are what they are. And even if we keep the Senate, if we lose the House, that's it. There's no opportunity for Biden to pass any sort of like major federalized voter reform like the John Lewis Voter Rights Act and stuff like that, to try to keep states from changing this, because there's no way in any of these House Republicans will give him that victory. House Republicans are less likely to vote with Biden than Senator Mitch McConnell, of all people, the Grim Reaper of legislation, has backed Biden or whipped votes for Biden to a far greater extent than I ever expected, and more so than McCarthy in the House has. So, I don't know, dude. I feel like the more you talk about it, like as you get back into it, I think it's going to be hard not to be doom or pilled.
Yeah, I guess we'll see. Like I said, the reason why I don't follow things day by day is because like a month ago I'd have been like, or no, like 2 months ago I'd have been ultra doom repelled because the Senate was too, and Biden and gas was going to be heading towards $10 a gallon, and like everything was like just so. Yeah, that's why I try to wait until it's a little more recent. Because there's no point in like all the emotional ups and downs until we're like approaching like weeks out, and then like voter minds are going to be super relevant towards elections and everything. It's like okay, yeah.
You know what I think it is? I think your newfound certitude, your confidence comes from the fact that you're now a celebrity among the Senate.
True. Actually,
dude,
true. They're coming out.
Okay.
Dude.
I know everyone's asked you about it. I'm going to take a crack at it too, because it's like, I don't think you should be scared or anything. I know you're not worried, but is it not surreal? Like you're this guy from Nebraska. Here you are. You've gotten the success. Your face was in front of the fucking U.S. Senate.
Well, I mean, it was funny. To be fair, I don't think it was like a full Senate. I'm pretty sure it was probably like a couple senators.
Oh, okay, cool. You're right. Yeah, no big deal. Just a subcommittee hearing on like national security.
Listen, it is what it is. I was only there because Fuentes was still in the spotlight. They didn't even get any of my anti-Semitic remarks, so.
They'd only play the clip 5 seconds longer. Maybe you'll be in the next one. They'll go through all like the deleted tweets about, something about bending your takes over or something like that. Wasn't that the tweet? You remember?
Bending your
from
types,
friend?
the little wait. Do you? No, yeah, I don't think I would want that one in front of Congress.
Yeah, probably not. Probably not. Well, it wasn't yours. Again, it was your band
that
buddies.
Weird guy that posted pictures.
Yeah,
of
you had no idea. Who was again obsessed with your wife. It was very strange. The last thing I had for you was about the Brett Weinstein thing, because that was another thing that you brought up as a thing with Beasley, and I haven't brushed up on this, but I was like, when I went through my centrist arc, that was at the time that Weinstein was like he kind of breached the public consciousness there because of the was it Evergreen State or something like that, and him and his brother being outspoken.
Yeah.
Do you, given that he wasn't forced to quit, given that he resigned as a condition for a lawsuit that he filed, if I remember correctly, he and his wife, I think was employed there too, and they got a settlement, and one of the terms was, okay, here's your cash settlement, but resign. That was one of the examples you cited as the very dangerous, censorious nature of the left and how it's creeping up to the dangerous anti-democratic nature of the right. Like that was an example.
Yeah.
Do you think that it's possible that you give that an outsized weight? Like that, just given what you do, given the fact
I think that people have been giving it an outsized weight for a long time, but like as of recently, it's getting harder and harder to say that. Did you see the settlement just recently against, I'm not going to remember the college, but I think basically there was a bakery across the street. Black person stole something. They had security come out and hold them down until the cops showed up. Bunch of students started protesting, and I think the college across the street basically supported this idea that like, yeah, that's a racist bakery, and like tried to destroy the bakery. And I think they just won. Was it Oberlin? They just won a huge suit against that college for, I think, was it for defamation? Maybe. It was like was it like 10, 20, 30 million dollars? It was a huge suit. But basically the school had tried to like paint this bakery as like racist because of them just like trying to hold somebody down that had stolen shit from them.
No, I've not heard that. No.
Yeah, that was a big. $36.59 million is what they're expected to pay in the death.
Did you say 36 or 3.6?
36.
30. They paid a $36 million settlement. No. Oberlin, you said?
Yeah.
Oh shit. Oberlin College to pay $36 million to bakery owners who said they were falsely accused of racism. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I haven't done any research into this. Whatever. I'll take that at face value. But
sure.
Were those student activists?
Student activists and kind of supported by the school, basically.
Going back to what we were talking about earlier, when I heard you say that to Luke, I'm thinking like, okay, these cringe emails, these really bad emails from, university researchers or their communications department. But then I'm thinking like all the shit that was said in the Trump administration between federal officers on a much bigger scale. And so again, I want to be very clear, not to say that this shit shouldn't be condemned or criticized, but when you say things like it's getting close, you're not saying those things are close, right?
And like if there was like some objective frame of reference to a third party of which to evaluate everything, I would say the Republican stuff is still scarier. It's just really hard because you have to make things like, you have to meet people at what their struggles are. Like, imagine you have a family that's really struggling with bills, and like maybe they're on the verge of losing their house, and like you've got like one of the children like just lost their first girlfriend or boyfriend. They're like 16, 17, and they just had their first big breakup. Like, imagine saying to that kid, like, dude, I don't know how you're sad about this. Like, dude, your parents have serious financial issues. Like, this is your first boyfriend, girlfriend. Who the f cares, right? Well, to that person, like that actually means more, maybe to them, right? Because it's the most important relationship so far in their life. So that's kind of where I'm like meeting people at. For a lot of these people, democratic norms don't really mean anything to them. And to even get them to understand why democratic norms are important would take like a 3-hour conversation of like building out all of society to do so, you know?
I'll concede that for rhetorical purposes and even just purposes of empathy, that it's important to acknowledge the validity of the concerns. And I think you do a good job of that. But you were in a conversation with Beasley, who is another leftist, offering your own opinion. And that's where I was kind of surprised. I would not begrudge you if in a conversation with Sneeko or with somebody else, you were like, holy shit. Dude,
well, and it was only with him because he was talking to me about that conversation. But like it's confusing because I understand what you're saying, because it kind of looks like I'm trying to like live in both worlds. Because if I was talking academically, my concerns about Trump, he's still like the #1 scary dude in the United States when it comes to like our freedoms and our democracy, easily. But like if I'm talking to a bunch of guys that are inundated with culture wars news and that's all they care about, these guys don't give a about democratic norms or democratic institutions. These guys don't know what the Supreme Court does, or even what the difference is between the House and the Senate. Or these guys don't know what the filibuster is, or what the nuclear button is, or why Merrick Garland should have been like, they have no idea. So if I say to them, hold on, you got to understand, you know, like the biggest threat to democracy right now is Donald Trump. They view Donald Trump as a culture war warrior. And in that sense, you know, Donald Trump has been like a little bit in terms of like the culture wars, and it's a more even fight there between like who's more of a risk in like the culture wars, Donald Trump versus like the left. But that's like the world that they live in, or like the culture wars world, basically. Yeah.
Do you think there's a way? I don't know if there's a way. I really don't, because but you have more experience with this than I do. Is there a way to simultaneously, out of empathy, and even if you genuinely feel this way, acknowledge the concerns of a right-winger, if those concerns are valid, and also try to keep them in perspective? Like, is there a way? I caught myself when I went through my own centrist
Hold on,
arc.
I'm so sorry. I'll never do this to you again in this conversation. I'm sorry, my YouTube chat is triggering the fuck out of me. Alex in chat says, homie thinks that we think Donald Trump is a culture warrior. Alex0393. I'm going to give you 10 seconds to name me one policy of Donald Trump that you like. Go. 1, 2, 3, 4.
God damn it, he's
5,
trying to Google. Give him a minute.
6, 7, 8. Border wall. First of all, that's not a policy, and second, he didn't even accomplish it. So like,
as a matter of fact, let's give our boy Biden credit. If Alex loves the border wall thing, let me tell you, Alex, got good news for you. President Biden was able to get the Mexican government to commit more than $1 billion to border security, baby, which is $1 billion more than Donald Trump was able to do.
So like the thing is, like, people will say this, like, oh, we don't view Donald Trump as a culture warrior. But when you ask everybody to, like, why do you like Donald Trump? It's because, well, he doesn't take any shit. Because he tells it like he is, or he tells it like it is. Like, these are all cultural answers, right? Donald Trump didn't have any fucking policies. Border wall is not a fucking policy. We already had a fucking border wall. And even if you did think that was an important policy, he failed miserably on all accounts of it. He literally mobilized the fucking military and tried to use executive action to get anything done because he couldn't pass shit through fucking Congress for it. So if border walls was something important to you, Donald Trump fucking failed miserably on it. That should be a point against him, not a point in favor of him. But yeah, nobody actually likes Donald Trump for his fucking policies. They like him because he's a culture war warrior. That's the only reason. If you think, now, there's nothing wrong with that. Culture wars are important. I understand. Culture is what you live every single day.
Just own it.
But just say that's what. Yeah, but don't say that. Pretend. People wheel out this like, oh no, Donald Trump had good policies. What? His tax cuts for the wealthy? Oh well, he's having to use executive actions to get any work done whatsoever. Oh well, I don't know. His foreign policy was good. What? Moving the embassy from Tel Aviv to fucking Jerusalem? You think that was good? I think like 2 countries.
Hey, he didn't get us in any more wars.
True. He also didn't pull us out of Afghanistan. Biden did, but then you on Biden for it, right? He abandoned our allies, the Kurds, in a way worse way than Biden might have abandoned anybody in Afghanistan. But you still, like, it's just, sorry. Anyway.
No. The Afghanistan thing was a huge trigger point for me, and it still is, even again on like when I have TikTok debates with people and conversations with folks, because that was the beginning. I don't want to say the beginning of the end, but that was the death knell of Biden's popularity, at least at the time, because after he pulled us out, it was just a dramatic fall in popularity, and it was frustrating because Biden was hamstrung by Trump's commitment. Like the whole thing, like I don't know how deep you dove into this, but like the whole thing's super.
Are you talking about the Doha agreements?
Yeah, the Doha agreement in 2020.
They'd given a date to leave. Yes, Trump made it. It was supposed to be even earlier. Like people like, well, Biden should have gotten out. I think it took him like 6 months to finally pull out from when the date was originally set. Yeah.
Dude, and the whole thing. So so not only did they not include the Afghan government in the negotiations, they gave like 6 or 7 conditions the U.S. government did for the Doha agreement. And the Taliban only met one, which was they did not shoot at U.S. troops. That's it. But the other 7 commitments, they failed to honor. Trump honored, ironically, corrupt, lying piece of Trump, the one and only time he followed through on a deal was with the Taliban when the Taliban was screwing him. He retrograded U.S. forces from like 12,500 down to 2,500. So reduced the number of U.S. personnel as the country was collapsing. He released the arrangement of 5,000 Taliban fighters from the Afghan government's prisons. Like he bullied the Afghan government into releasing 5,000 imprisoned Taliban, which is double the number of troops that he left Biden in. Afghanistan when Biden took over. And so, I mean, just like people are like, well, Biden should have done something. He would have essentially had to reinvade the country.
Yeah, and I think that's the issue. And I hate, too, that people always see things as hindsight. People have a really hard time running other scenarios in their mind. Like, we should have stayed in Afghanistan. Okay, let's say that we do. And the Taliban realizes, I guess they're not leaving. Americans are going to stay here. They're going to start to ramp up attacks again on U.S. troops. Then what? What do we do then? Let's say there's a bombing in Afghanistan, and let's say that by the Taliban. Now, some people are like, oh, well, there was a bombing. We let that. Well, I don't think the Taliban did that. Yeah. Let's say there was an attack by the Taliban. Okay, no if, ands, or buts about it. It happens, and we know it's them, and they claim it, and 25 soldiers are killed. Well, now what do we do? Are we going to do another surge in Afghanistan? Are we going to beef up or ramp up our presence again in Afghanistan? Like we're like in 27 different wars around the world. We're finally about to leave one theater, and instead now we stay there and then we make a bigger commitment. Is that like that's the way forward? Because if that was the case, everybody would be saying, and I can't convince them. I can't. But this is exactly what you would say. You're a conservative in my chat right now criticizing the Afghanistan pullout. The headlines would read, Biden too stubborn to uphold America's commitment to the Doha agreement that Donald Trump had ironed out, stubbornly leaves U.S. troops in Afghanistan and gets us mired down in another conflict. And every single article,
the death of 25 soldiers.
And every single article written would be, why didn't Biden pull out on Trump's timeline? Why didn't Biden leave when there was an agreement in place? Why didn't Biden get out when we had the opportunity to? You would say 1,000,000%. I know you would. You're lying to yourself. Like, no, we want to stay in Afghanistan. Bullshit. One of the biggest reasons you elected Trump was because he was anti-war. Remember all that shit about like Hillary wants to do a no-fly zone. Hillary wants to do a red line. They're going to get us in World War III, blah, blah, blah. One of the big reasons you elected Trump was anti-war. But no, if that would have happened, every article written would have been about how Biden didn't pull out of Afghanistan. And it's so stupid that they don't see it yet.
No, it is. And I'm glad you're calling out the double standard there, because it's one thing. It's one of the many things about the Afghanistan commentary that's super frustrating. And like even like other like false bits of information. So like they talk about how Biden left $80 billion worth of U.S. equipment in there. Number one, that figure's bullshit. Number two, it was equipment that we sold or loaned to Afghanistan over 20 years.
Yeah, and we can't leave and say we're taking all of our shit and get f***ed. Like even if we know that it's you have to maintain a good faith, like, well, good luck, ANI, like that's on you guys. Like we're not gonna steal all of our shit back. And they're like,
yeah, can you imagine what the Taliban would have done? They would have been like, no. I mean, yeah, hey, it's also the size of like Afghanistan's like what the size of like 4 U.S. states. What are we gonna do with the 2,500 troops that Trump left us? Less than 3,000 in Afghanistan. Biden's gonna like send them out with a fucking divining rod and metal detectors and go pick that shit. It's stupid. I mean, and even like the airport thing. Like I can remember all this from memory because it's been just constant. Like people are like, well, Biden should. I tell you what Biden did. Trump wouldn't have abandoned that one airport, Bagram, and it's like it was half an hour outside of Kabul, which was the major population center, what you wanted him to like ferry 2 million people 30 minutes away and leave them vulnerable to ISIS-K attacks or Taliban. Like, what? So it's infuriating. Yeah, I don't know. I'm glad you're speaking out about this, though. It's a year late, but
it is. I mean, no one is gonna, but
no. I don't know. I like I said, I'm definitely nervous about this.
I can't, dude. I hate actually I like culture warrior more because I can just like give like narratives, but like people that like deny facts so much drive me crazy. This guy in chat, y'all talk about Trump's foreign policy as if it was bad and then Biden is great. Honestly, this seems like the Donald syndrome. Let's see. Trump's foreign policy off the top of my head made every fucking world leader fucking hate us. Horrible relationships with everybody around the world. An incredibly unpopular move of the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. I think like Kosovo and maybe one other country supported that. I don't know if anybody else did. Embarrassed
abandoned
us.
The Kurds, like you said.
Yeah, abandoned Kurdish people in northern Syria. Embarrassing relationship with North Korea, where we're
Wait a minute. Hey, Destiny. Let's be fair here. He had a conversation with Kim Jong-un that led...
to photo ops. We were making concessions to North Korea without getting any concessions from them. Pulled out of the Iranian nuclear arms deal, or not nuclear arms deal, the joint pact, whatever action, the nuclear thing that had us monitoring all of the Iranian databases and shit. What other foreign policy blunders do we have? It's just like the stupid shit tried to blackmail Ukraine because they wouldn't dig up dirt on fucking Hillary Clinton.
Biden. It was Biden.
Oh, was it Biden? Oh, it might have been Biden.
Yeah.
Sorry, it was Biden. Yeah.
Yeah, that was his first impeachment. His first. It was his first but not last impeachment. Like that in and of itself. You want to talk about a career ender right there? If that had been anybody else.
General tariffs on China were stupid. His entire treatment of NATO was stupid. I don't know if Soleimani was a good or bad idea. I'm kind of on the fence about it.
I know he caught some flack from that. Some from, like, again, more fringe elements of the left. But it's kind of like when Biden just vaporized, I'm blanking on his name, but it's the leader of leader of Al-Qaeda. That dude planned.
Oh, the al-Zawahiri or whatever, but yeah.
Al-Zawahiri, yes. Like, vaporized him. I'm cool with that. Like, I know some people there, again, criticize that too. You know, that's just going to embolden Al-Qaeda. It's like, no, I mean, number one, it was perfectly legitimate. He was a terrorist. It was a perfectly legitimate target. And as far as I know, 0 civilian casualties. Which seems like it's rare these days for drone.
True.
Biden's basically killed the drone war. You know, like that. That's another
I've
thing
seen that get toned down.
About.
Okay, no logic behind any of his statements. He's just saying talking points without reasons to why they are bad things. So the movement east of the embassy from Tel Aviv east into Jerusalem was a bad idea because Israel's occupation of Jerusalem and their constant fighting in what was the name of the neighborhood in East Jerusalem? That everybody was fighting about because Palestinians got kicked out and they were fighting back and forth over who had rights to land. There's a name for this little block of houses. Somebody in chat was
saying the Gaza Strip, but that's not it.
The Sheikh Jarrah, like that whole area, that blew up, and there was a huge contention around like who owns what parts of Jerusalem. The idea of trying to move an embassy over there to like solidify Israeli ownership over it, when this is an incredibly contentious issue, not only within Israel but across the entire world, is a bad political move. The United States should not be throwing its weight inappropriately behind that sort of conflict like that, and you can tell because the movement of that embassy was worldwide extremely unpopular.
And then getting us out of the Iranian nuclear deal, that's a huge one too, because based on all evidence from national security advisors, that deal was working to disincentivize Iran to pursue its nuclear enrichment program. And we know for a fact that since Trump took us out of that deal, that they are closer now than ever because they have no deterrence not to. Well, you were buying them off. Grow up. That's unfortunately the real world where we sometimes have to buy people off to not try to hurt us.
Yeah,
So,
there's this weird thing where we're always moving towards almost sort of kind of becoming okay with Iran, and then we'll always do something to nuke that bridge. Bush did it when he called them the fucking axis of evil and fucking set us against Iran. Trump did it when he went back on that Iranian deal where we started to unfreeze some of their funds, like maybe we could start to lessen sanctions or whatever because they were following through on maintaining distance from nuclear weapons. But we nuked that. That was bad because that deal was going incredibly positively in terms of keeping them away from nuclear weapons, which is always good. Everything we did with North Korea was a joke. It made our allies in the region feel unsafe. I think Japan specifically cited concerns that North Korea was continuing to test missiles and stuff, despite the fact that we had an open line of dialogue with them. And I think I think
South Korea was pissed too. Yeah. I mean, they're right across the DMZ.
I mean, like, what else? The general lack of relationships with worldwide leaders and everybody. I think it was Angela Merkel that was literally saying that, like, we can't look to U.S. guidance on any international problems anymore. Europe lost faith in the United States.
They laughed at us at that UN conference. You remember that when Trump he got on stage and said something, and there was an audible cacophony of laughter from the entire peanut gallery.
The general undermining of NATO and the mission of NATO around the world. It's not just to build a NATO military and have people throw their money in. It's the idea of exerting U.S. influence over the rest of the world, or at least over NATO countries, to ensure some level of geopolitical stability. The likes of which has been enjoyed for the past 30 years over all of Europe. It's been the most stable it's ever been. I think in large part due to the existence of NATO. Undermining that was a bad idea. Like, I don't know. Like, it's not just random talking points. Like, Trump's foreign policy was legitimately like the foreign policy of like a 5-year-old dip. He was a fucking moron. He had no greater plan, no greater vision for anything. He was just a hardcore isolationist cuck that didn't know anything about any of the issues that he spoke about. I would bet $1,000 that I bet $10,000 if I had Trump in front of me, like, this guy couldn't point out like where fucking Pakistan is on a map. I know he couldn't. He would have no fucking idea. Like, he
would tell you. He would just say, believe me, yeah. And nobody points out Pakistan quite like I do, but yeah, he'd never be able to point it out. Yeah. You know, that was one of the things I wanted to say earlier was about Trump. One of the things I'm trying to get better at for the past several months is, even though Trump is the leader of the Republican Party, if we're being real, he's not conservative. Like, he's an ideologically inconsistent moron who's
not at all.
Republican, Democrat, you know, like, for the longest time,
Bro,
I guess.
He's a real estate guy from fucking New York City.
Right.
Like, this is the leader of the Republican Party? A real estate dude from New York City? Come the fuck on. That's hilarious. Right. A billionaire. That's so funny to me, dude.
Is there anybody do you think that appeal works with anybody? It's like, look, you know, there's this idea that, you know, Speaker Pelosi said a couple of months ago that, you know, she longs for, you know, a loyal opposition Republican Party, which I guess if there's going to be a Republican Party, that would be the best one to have. But do you think that there's any success in appealing to either offline, one-on-one conversations, or even like in online panels, to appealing to that? Like, look, you know, you and I disagree, Republican, Democrat, we have different policy objectives, but you need to understand that the leader of the party for which you vote, he doesn't share your values. He's not a conservative. He's a grifter. Like, is there any way? I think the whole Republican Party, the leadership of the party, is at the moment because of what they've allowed Trump to do. But even if we were just like refining our focus and trying to cut the umbilical cord between a Republican voter and Trump, do you think there's any ground to appealing to the fact that he doesn't share their values, that he is this, you know, billionaire real estate mogul?
No, they super just don't give a fuck, dude. They totally don't give a fuck. I don't know what, even my parents, because my mom was like a huge values person, and she just doesn't give a fuck. She excuses every single like shortcoming of Trump.
I thought your mom like distanced herself from him after January 6th, or am I making that shit up?
You are absolutely making that shit up, dude. My mom would pick up a rifle and fight for Trump against the Republic if she had to. Like, absolutely. I asked even my mom, because I was curious, if DeSantis and Trump ran, who would you vote for? It was Trump instantly. I didn't even finish the sentence. She's like, Trump, of course.
Over DeSantis?
Yeah, easily, of course. Yeah. They're just, yeah.
Maybe she just doesn't. She doesn't live in Florida, right? Is she familiar with him?
She lives in Florida. She know? Yeah, she lives like 30 minutes from me. She lives down at Homestead.
I did not know this.
Yep.
I did not know this. Interesting. Some other things I wanted to quickly ask you about and I hate bringing this guy up because I think that anytime you say his name, it gives him a level of attention he doesn't deserve, but I am curious. Did you see that Jackson Hinkle is now a MAGA communist?
Yeah, I've seen this whole basic bullshit. Yeah, I've seen it. Yeah, he was on.
As somebody, you debated him once or twice, right? Or am I making that up too?
Yeah, he's one of the most painful people. He just has like kind of like political talking points. He doesn't engage with anything you say at all. Just really, 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 really annoying. Yeah.
do you think he is a grifter? Because seems to be the consensus. Like, didn't he come out right and say that he will say anything for clout? Like, is he?
I don't know if he's a grifter. He just has
his
like
values.
he's got like political talking points, and that's what he runs down. I don't even know if he's like a human brain or if he's just like a political robot that just like repeats the same talking points.
Are you surprised by the level of prominence that he's getting? Because I think he was on like Tucker Carlson, and he's been on like OAN and stuff like that. I mean,
yeah, he just spouts like the standard like populist talking points. That's it. Like I could like give you like programming that could generate every talking point that guy would ever say. He's incredibly predictable.
another conversation that you had that I missed at the time, but a buddy of mine linked to me to about a week ago. You had a really good conversation with Sam Seder. I don't know how long ago it was, but it was about Kyle Rittenhouse and Citizens United. I would love to hear you two talk more about Citizens United, because I think he made a compelling case that the issue with Citizens United went far beyond the facts of the case, that perhaps just deciding the facts of the case, there was legal merit to it, but the implication that it had for campaign finance is pretty wide sweeping and pretty negative in the grand scheme of things.
I'd have to go over it specifically, but I had two lawyers email me saying that like part of the requests of that company, the lawyer for that company, was for broader rulings, but maybe they could have ignored it. But I thought that there were a couple of requests that were made that basically demanded the Supreme Court made some of those broader rulings. I could be wrong on that, but like,
where are you with the notion of like campaign finance and not just in terms of like
I don't care. I almost don't care at all about it.
Really?
Yeah, I feel like the money in politics and all that is way, way, way overblown. But that's where I'm at right now. But
that's fair. Okay.
I feel like is it Nina Turner? Did she learn that over her past two election cycles?
Yeah, I think she lost. She's running for something now too. I think she lost to. She lost the last two, and I want to say she's running for office somewhere, maybe a mayorship. Speaking of, did you see? Stacey Abrams is starting to trail big time against Brian Kemp in Georgia. Like I think it was fairly close for a while, but Kemp's starting to pull ahead. And same thing with Beto O'Rourke with Greg Abbott. Greg Abbott's starting to really pull ahead. It might even be in double digits at this point. So I know for a while there, I guess I was cautiously optimistic, especially, unfortunately, after Uvalde. I thought that that would be the end of Abbott as governor of Texas. But it's not looking like it.
I have no idea, but...
Interesting. All right. Well, dude, listen, it was really nice chatting with you. I'm glad you're doing well. I hope you don't die in Hurricane Ian.
Me too.